Namaste. I'm going to just start by saying thank you again for having me. I always really enjoy these sessions that we have. And I can't believe the retreat is only 9 weeks away. That's just crazy. I really felt a pull to talk tonight about the fundamental thing for me about awakening, which is to, at least in my own journey, which was to really overturn this habit of focusing on thought more and more. The more that we focus on thought, the more that our life energy, our happiness, our joy, our well-being, our passion, our creativity is diminished. And although it may sound like a simple thing to just take our attention off of thought and to bring it back to the emptiness of our being, in practice, it can sometimes seem more challenging, as I very well remember. But what if the answer to how to do that was simpler than perhaps we have appreciated? Maybe that there is no magic technique to doing that except for bringing our attention back to the emptiness of our being over and over again. Maybe that's enough in itself to overcome this habit. It's effortless to pay attention to nothing, to nothing. And it costs us actually a lot of energy every second that we're paying attention to something. And that is usually to thoughts, isn't it? We're usually paying attention to our thoughts. And if you're anything like I was, pretty much missing reality completely and living in this virtual reality that was going on up here. What I thought was going on in the world and what I thought was going on in my life and what I thought I was and all of that stuff was so much more real than what was actually going on when I was experiencing it. It seemed very, very hard to bring attention away. And a new reality was kind of underneath this, but how do we get to that was this question that was driving a lot of efforting, let's just say, a lot of seeking and efforting. And in the end, I really just came to see that if I just keep bringing my attention back to that which is not a thing, the nothingness, and doing that enough times, it starts to seep into our body and mind how much more pleasant it is when we do that. At first, it may seem a lot of effort to even notice the emptiness. And it may seem less effort to pay attention to thoughts because that's the momentum we've got going on. So we may ironically have to exert a little effort, a little vigilance to bring attention back to the emptiness of our being. The spaciousness in which all of this is appearing is here right now and is here all the time, and it is our essential nature. However, we can miss it completely if we're focusing or zooming in on things arising inside this spaciousness, this beingness. So what if we stop fighting with thoughts and simply use them to allow us to contrast back to the emptiness? Every time I perceive something, so if that's a thought or an emotion or an experience that's happening or another being in front of me, I can use that as contrast to show me the emptiness in which that somethingness is appearing. Could that be a very simple way of meditating that we could slip into if we didn't try to push away thoughts when they came up, as they do for all of us, but instead use them as a platform, as a tool, as something useful even, that these thoughts I'm aware of these thoughts and they're popping up inside the emptiness, the space, which is my beingness. And if you haven't really kind of digested that yet, you might still be at war with your mind to some degree or waiting for it to go silent. So I'd just like to invite you to maybe try a different attitude with your mind, that maybe without the contrast of somethingness, things coming and going like thoughts, we wouldn't really ever have recognized that which is not a thing, because it's just always been here, and it's not moving, and it's not changing, and it's not shouting for attention. And it would be easy, even though it's the only thing that's here all the time, to completely overlook it, as I did, as we all do. So I began to realize that every time something popped up in my awareness, in my emptiness, whether it's a thought or an emotion or a sensation or awareness of my body or some sound in my environment, anything at all that was coming and going, it was, I trained myself to kind of use that as a tool to point me back to the emptiness. And when I did this, it kind of, most of my mind, my resistance to my mind fell away, because I realized I don't need it to stop. I don't need it to go away. I don't need it to be quiet so that I can recognize the empty silence. And that was a huge, huge thing for me. And ironically, then it started to go quiet, because I was no longer pushing against it, pushing away thoughts as the enemy or something like that. You know, I had this, and you may be able to kind of feel it inside yourself, this sense that the mind is the problem. It is the issue. And if it would just stop doing its thing, then everything will be fine. But maybe simpler and subtler than that is our attitude to it, how we're working with it, how we're holding it inside ourselves. So next time a thought arises, if we wait a few seconds and see what the next thought is that pops up. If you watch and see right now what your next thought is, if you really pay attention, watching, what's the next thought going to be in my head? You might suddenly become aware of this emptiness, this space, this intense aliveness in which there isn't a thing yet. And then a thought will pop in. And even if a thought pops in, or 5 or 6 thoughts, or an emotion or something, it's still not really obscuring this alive emptiness of our being, is it? It's just happening inside it. Only if we think this thought has to disappear before we can come back to noticing this empty aliveness, we'll be kind of stuck. So we're just noticing that there is a space, an emptiness, and not a thing yetness in which all of this is arising. And we don't have to describe it or anything, we just have to notice it. And just doing that on a consistent basis, even for a short time each day, is going to begin to override this habit we've had of a few hundred lifetimes, probably, of paying attention to thoughts, the coming and goingness. And most of us are really only paying attention to thoughts now because we're trying to get rid of them, or we think they shouldn't be there, that we're in resistance to them somehow. And that very energy of being in resistance to our mind is perpetuating it. This thing that I'm so sure should not be here can never go away, while I'm so sure it's here and it should not be. It's a powerful command that's fueling the thought stream to have more things for me to resist. And instead of resisting, we can just welcome the thought as much as we can, use it to point us back to the emptiness. And what if our meditation became this kind of way of being, that whenever something arises inside my being, I'll use it as contrast, the seeming opposites of something and nothing, which are not really, but they seem to be. Help me recognize even clearer that there's always something that is not a thing, this emptiness that's always present, the spaciousness, this alive emptiness, as I seem to be calling it tonight, that's kind of the background and the context in which everything is happening. So if you can really just let this soften your attitude to the mind, your resistance to the mind, make a fundamental shift in your being. You can do this right now, just kind of recognizing that even thoughts have a purpose and a value when we take them into our meditation. They're going to come and go. They're going to arise and fall away. And maybe they're helping us see as they come and go and move. They're helping us see this stillness, this emptiness in contrast. And maybe when we're aware of thoughts, we're more likely to notice there's awareness. Something that's just continuous and never ending, never starting, and everywhere at all times, and invisible and intangible is actually quite hard to notice at first when we've been trained to recognize only that which is moving and changing. So when I really got this, it just kind of changed everything for me. And I really would like to invite you to allow it to change your attitude, your orientation to meditation. Because even when I was starting to listen to silence or notice emptiness, it was still punctuated by these moments of thoughts arising and wishing they would go away, and then coming back to silence, thoughts arising and disturbing me, and coming back to silence over and over again. When I really began to get that thoughts don't actually disturb me, it's only my sense that they shouldn't be there, that they're interrupting my meditation. That's actually what's disturbing me. Or if there's some loud noise going on when I'm trying to meditate, trying to notice the emptiness of being, the sense that this noise should stop because it's in the way is actually what's disturbing me rather than the noise itself. In contrast, this very loud noise, the silence of my being is very crystal clear. So maybe we need all this stuff for contrast. And maybe the overactivity of thought, of mind, is really only because we're in resistance to it. Maybe because we just haven't figured out the best way to use mind to work with this thought stream. And when we really soften our way of being with it, it's going to change completely. Because there's no effort needed to notice emptiness. Right now, there's an empty spaciousness in which your body and your thoughts and everything is appearing. The room you're sitting in, the planet, the universe. And it's just here, isn't it? You didn't have to do any acrobatics or anything to notice it. You just notice it's here. And gradually, just noticing this is going to begin to free up all the energy that we have tied up in the thought stream in the mind. All the energy that we're investing in desperately trying to control our experience in this moment and control how everyone else is with us and all of that stuff. As that begins to get freed up and you're more and more interested in this moment now as it is actually, then you begin to feel alive again, and you begin to feel energetic again and passionate, and like you came here for a reason, that you have this body for a reason, that you first of all have to see what you really are, and then allow whatever unique gifts you have as an individual to flow into the world. And the first step of that is really seeing what you are, that you're not limited at all by anything. So can meditation become an attitude? Could it become a way of being? Could it become a way of holding our mind rather than something we're doing or practicing? Could it be a way of gently contrasting? Could it become something different inside your heart than perhaps you've thought about it before? Is it just something, I'm going to sit down and meditate now because I really want to get beyond the mind and this is the way to do it? Or Can I meditate now so that I can recognize what's already here in and amongst the mind and isn't disturbed by any of it? It's a different way really to come into our practice, into our meditation. And it begins to feel really beautiful because you're really just falling in love with what is when you do it this way. It's okay that thoughts are here. And I can recognize thoughts are coming and going inside the emptiness. There has to be some space, some awareness, something, not something that's not a thing. There isn't a word in the English language, as far as I'm aware, in which all of this is coming and going. And maybe the coming and goingness of it all is not actually in the way of my seeing. It's an aid to my seeing, to my meditation. So let's just be with this for a few minutes. Let's just sit with this for a few minutes. Whenever a thought pops up, let's just see if we can soften resistance to it and allow it to just show us by contrast what's in the background, what's the space in which that thought is appearing, or an emotion, if it's an emotion, or any sensation you may have, any noise going on around you. Even these words are coming and going inside the emptiness of our being. And in contrast, when they stop, there's some emptiness that's more obvious, isn't there? So just recognizing you don't have to be at war with anything, least of all the mind. Meditation can become a kind of love affair with what is. There's the emptiness of being. And whatever is arising and falling away inside it. Very, very passive thing, meditation. Just noticing. Becoming more and more effortless to just notice. Enjoying how it feels. Allowing our body to enjoy. And from time to time, a thought may pop up. And some idea, mind will do what it does. And we can simply notice the thought and allow it to point us back to the spaciousness. Just enjoying the effortless emptiness that's here. Doesn't cost us anything to notice nothing, nothingness, emptiness. And it actually begins to allow an excess of energy, right? Maybe for the first time into the body. Helps us feel more relaxed, more content, more fulfilled. There's really nothing we need to do about our mind. As we stop fighting and just notice. It feels so nice to not have to pay attention to anything at all. When we're not in resistance to anything, naturally, the emptiness just presents itself, the spaciousness. Just this simple thing, paying attention to nothingness, emptiness. The more that we do this, the better it's going to feel. It doesn't matter if thoughts pop up. Just seeing the thoughts and then seeing the emptiness they're appearing in. Just enjoying with me this deep quietness and rest that comes from noticing the emptiness. Taking refuge in the place before things, that things arise out of. And we really can't get this wrong. We just notice emptiness, and at some point we'll notice a thought, and then we notice emptiness, and so on. And it becomes just more of a resting, of a relaxing, of a being. There's no goal. Nowhere to get to. We're just enjoying this here. Falling in love with emptiness. Falling in love with mind. No need to fight. When you know nothingness, you're free. Emptiness. Can you fall so deeply in love with this that you forget how to fight and resist? That you begin to live like, be like the emptiness. Empty of substance and yet full of peace, full of love. More and more just being like this. Just inviting this emptiness into your body, into your mind. Each time we notice emptiness, we lose a little bit of our ability to fight, to struggle, to resist. And we're becoming more and more effortless, free, open, quiet. This place where there isn't anything yet. Before time, before change, before anything. And then emptiness is joined by peace, contentment, a deep and lasting satisfaction. Which will become joy, wisdom, purpose, love, passion, life, well-being. Freedom. liberation from struggling. Just by falling in love more each day. An endless love affair. Emptiness, recognizing emptiness. Empty and yet full. Rich. And deep. This emptiness is never disturbed. It can never suffer. It's not trying hard. Just be like this. Just be like this as much as you can. So I hope that you enjoyed the emptiness and how simple meditation can be when we relax and stop resisting. And we learn perhaps how to work with mind, with thoughts. That you begin to experience what I experience. And I'm still falling in love and always will be. I hope you had a taste of that, and I hope you want more. Yeah, I hope it's ignited a curiosity and a passion for maybe a whole rediscovery of what meditation can be, that it's not always what we think it is, that it doesn't have to be a struggle, it doesn't have to be difficult. And sometimes if it's a struggle and it's difficult, that's okay also. We all have those days, we all have those times, those moments. So I just wanted to leave some time if anybody wants to share their experience or any challenges or any questions that anyone has. We have some time now to go through, talk about stuff. If anybody has anything on their mind or anything they're struggling with, feel free to shout out or raise your hand or both. Is there anything that anyone would like me to talk about more, or anything that you've been struggling with? Maybe that seems like too much effort after being in the emptiness. Seems like a lot of struggle, effort. We can just relax a few more minutes if you want to. Can you notice a slowing down that's happening? Can you feel something slowing down as we meditate like that? Something for me that just began to slow down that never really sped up again. Each time I meditated like that, I just kind of stayed a little bit slower. Couldn't quite resist as much, little by little each time. And then one day, quite accidentally found I couldn't resist at all, which was very strange, but nice. When that happened, when that fell away, I don't know, but just like this. Something fell away when I wasn't noticing. I was just being empty, silent. And you can probably notice that happening for you as well. And we all have our times when something pops up, some strong emotion, some situation, and we find ourselves resisting it. But can you notice that you're resisting it less? Can you notice that you're less judgmental with yourself afterwards? Can you notice that you come back to your equilibrium faster? And this is the effect of the emptiness seeping into our mind and our body and our thoughts and everything. My stomach has something interesting to say. Let's just spend a few minutes being quiet then. See, we have some hands up there. Sorry, I was drifting. Patricia, when you're ready.
Hi, Helen.
Hi.
There you are. Thank you. It was beautiful. I have been today on a very good day. Just became all one with my feelings and emotions. But I think I after so many times you have explained about the spaciousness, I think I got it this time. It just seems to one needs to just listen and listen and listen and listen until you get it.
Yeah.
And it is true that for example, today had a very kind of like a tough day, but also I noticed that it didn't last that long.
Good.
And it was a strong, they were strong feelings and emotions, very strong, but they didn't last as long as they used to.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And hopefully you were gentler with yourself while it was happening. And
I was even if inside, and I was with the person with whom this thing happened, and I was able to be, even though I was in turmoil inside about two very strong feelings, but I was able to be very kind. Good. And to just speak my truth, few words. And that was great because it left me in peace. Yeah. A little sadness and so many things, so many feelings, but not reacting was just great. Was incredible.
And that is the fruit of meditation, isn't it? Being able to be that in those moments, even though there's some strong emotion or something heavy coming up. Yep. Just being able to let that happen as much as possible and not losing our integrity, our wholeness, and all of that in that moment. And just that just gets easier and easier the more you rest as the emptiness. It's not pushing against anything, is it? Even these negative emotions and all of that, it's just here, and you just kind of start to behave like that more and more without even realizing it's going on.
Yes. Now that I've had the taste, the aftermath of not doing anything, answering properly, but calmly and with kindness, of course. It's like just my family, but the taste is just fantastic.
Let's keep falling in love more and more with that. Yeah. Wonderful.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you, Helen. Thank you.
Lovely.
Dearly.
Good to talk to you. Okay. Kelly.
Hi, Helen.
Hi, how are you doing?
Good. I loved your meditation.
Good.
I just wanted to ask if everything seems to be more like a dream.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yep. Very much so. Because everything we think is happening is really a dream anyway, isn't it? In reality, all of this is just moving and coming and going. Shapes are changing and coming and going. Pretty much everything else we think is going on is only what we think is happening. We're just adding commentary, aren't we, to the natural movement of manifestation. And that commentary, it just becomes more and more dreamlike. It's not really what's going on, is it? Everything's just moving by itself, unfolding.
Absolutely not what's going on.
Not a lot. Yeah. It does feel a little weird at first, that it's like sometimes it felt for me like I was kind of losing touch with something, but it was really only my ability to distort reality that's disappearing, you know.
but it yes, it is. It's very it's a little scary, but or a little like there's nothing to hang on to.
Yeah. And there's something inside goes with it. I don't have any reference point now. I don't have any way to organize myself or anything, and starts freaking out. But you know, we're only returning to how we've always functioned naturally anyway. You know, it's always good to remind ourselves we're only going back to our natural state. And that even when we thought we had a reference point, you know, for what I think is going on right now, that wasn't really so true anyway, was it? Is it so scary to get rid of a map and compass when they're telling us the wrong thing anyway?
Right. It's like I can't snap out of it. I can't snap back to anything.
Good. So something inside is flailing around probably at this point going, yes, but you can't live like this.
Yeah.
You know, you got to get stuff done, you know, you got to go to work. But you know, if you trust this more and more, it will show you that you can do everything. Your body's quite capable of doing everything while you rest like this. In fact, it'll do it even better, you know, be even more organized and all of that stuff. Just little by little, you start to trust more, don't you? Just going through life like this, just empty of commentary, less and less commentary. And then life flows smoother and smoother. The less commentary there is going on, the smoother our life is. So you just start to trust it more and more. And then it's just very, very quiet and everything's just happening quite naturally.
Will I ever be able to put 4 sentences in a row together?
Yes. Maybe not in the middle stage. In the middle stage, it feels a lot of effort to do anything, you know, right when you start to rest like this. But you go through that and out the other side, and how long that takes is how much we resist it. There's a time for me when I didn't think I'd ever be able to do anything ever again. But it was very, very quick when I realized that's just a thought too. And it must be possible for me to function and live my life like this, because this is my natural state. What I was living as was some artificially contrived state. And I managed to function in that state. So it's got to be easier actually than harder this way. Just don't believe any thoughts about it, right? Or you're not going to be able to get up for work, and you know it's going to get too strong, and you'll just be sitting there drooling, and you won't want to talk to anyone or eat anything, you know.
It hasn't happened yet, but I had those thoughts come. Yep.
Yeah. It's because mind thinks it's something other, right? You're only finding out what you have always been and living like that more authentically.
Yeah.
So, yeah. The trust in it grows because you begin to see that your life just becomes more and more beautiful the more you trust it. So it just gives you permission to kind of let go even more. Lovely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Sina?
I just am in deep gratitude with the meditation. I had an experience earlier today where I found out my aunt, who was like a mom to me the first few years of my life, she passed away. And there was, right before this program, I was even sharing in the sanctuary about this deep grief. And I was noticing during the meditation that emptiness you kept pointing to over and over again, it was just there and profound and deep. And there is all the Shakti and vibration of just peace happening inside of me right now. And I'm actually in awe right now that can even happen. That in the midst of this, it's just blowing my mind because, well, one, it's unexpected, kind of like finding out about her death 3 o'clock this morning is kind of blindsided me. But at the same time, the fact that I can feel this much, it feels like an ocean of bliss.
Yeah.
And to remember right there in the middle of the meditation and inviting her in and remembering she too is this.
Yeah.
She
And
too
not
has
gone.
been reached.
Yeah. Not only the body,
Yeah.
only the body gone, but there's a deep intimacy here with all of life, isn't there? You know?
Yeah. And it's really profound and it's really deep. And it happened to what you were saying, how you were slowing down.
Yeah.
I felt that everything was slowing way down. And if thoughts would come, it was just like you were saying, I could use them as contrast, like that platform of just to point me right back to that shimmering brilliance right behind it.
Mm.
And when I opened my eyes after the meditation and I looked at your face, it was like your face was a light bulb. I mean, there was so much glowing. I could see this light just infusing your face, and it was just brilliant. And I'm like, oh, that's how we all look. And so there was this moment of light recognition and actually seeing it in front of my eyes. And I'm just deeply grateful.
How
I'm
you all
deeply
look to me.
grateful.
That's how you all appear to me, you know.
Wow. It's so
without
beautiful.
without the thoughts in the way, it's kind of more obvious, isn't it? Or without resisting the thoughts. It's I still remember the first time I felt grief and bliss at the same time. I hadn't thought it was possible at all. Deep, profound sense of loss and this peace and bliss at the same time. And it was just such a pivotal moment, really, that in anything from our human beingness can be embraced in this and dealt with, worked through, loved, just embraced by this emptiness. And whatever ups and downs come in our human life, we can be with them from here, can't we?
And it's so tender and sweet.
Yeah.
It's like,
and you
is
can't
that,
help it.
I am that.
Yeah, exactly.
And that
And you
can't
can't help
die.
but help. Everyone you meet is just touched by this when you're living like that, It's truly a gift for each one of us to see it and be it. So thank you for being willing to feel that even today, even now while this is going on for you. That's openness right there. That's willingness, and that's beautiful, I just have to say. Well, that seems like a good place to hand the mic back to you. So thank you, all of you, for your presence and your commitment and your aliveness and your emptiness. Namaste.